Hey there, and welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabriele Nicolet. I am a toddler whisperer, a speech therapist, and a parent coach. And today I am joined by Sara Bybee Fisk. Sara, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm delighted that you have come. So I want you to tell the good people a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then we're going to get into our topic today.
I am a coach. I work with women who find that they are ready to just die of resentment because they are stuck in people pleasing and they can't stand it another minute. And where we always start the conversation is as children, because we are taught to people please in childhood. And as I'm sure we're going to get into, it has such far reaching implications for our mental, emotional, even physical health as women, as humans who are socialized as women. And it's the thing I'm just most passionate about, because when you are stuck in people pleasing, you go through life feeling like you don't have a choice. And I want all women to just enjoy the freedom of being able to choose for themselves and for their families and for their time and their energy, what they want to be doing with that.
And if you're listening and you're like, yeah, I sure wish I could do that, keep listening.
Absolutely.
So it occurs to me that actually being born a girl or socialized as a woman, we are kind of all required to mask,
Right.
even if, and obviously this podcast is aimed for parents who have children who are a little bit neurodivergent or neurospicy, neurosparkly.
Yeah.
Even if we're not neurospicy,
Right.
we have
Yeah.
to mask. So
Yeah.
let's talk about for just a second, before we even go to like any kind of neurosparkliness, how are women and girls taught to mask who they are?
Uh, it's an incredibly relevant question. And actually, I'm going to broaden it up just even a little bit more, because before I became a coach, I'm a mom of five, of varying, degrees of everything from neurospiciness and sparkliness to LGBTQ, gender identity. And so I was a teacher before that. And so I have a degree in childhood education, which means a lot of child development classes. And one of the things that I is helpful to be reminded of is that whoever has set into motion the way things are on this planet set it up that babies come into the world completely dependent on big people. And it is a survival instinct for a baby to win the care of bigger, more capable adults, whoever those adults are. And so if you know a baby or you've seen one on TV, they cry and then something happens. Hopefully, somebody comes in, changes them, cuddles them, feeds them, helps them go to sleep, interacts with them. And so they make that connection. Oh, I do this, and someone comes and takes care of me. And so that cause and effect is the foundation of survival for a baby, because when a baby smiles, if you've been in the room when a baby smiles, all the adults go, oh my gosh, she's smiling. And baby, that part of their brain that gets a dopamine response for surviving lights up, and they're like, oh, they like that. And so baby smiles and then learns to wave and then says mommy and daddy. And then the foundation is set for, I behave in a certain way and I get a reward. And then baby grows older. And then the other side of that coin starts to develop, where I behave a certain way and I get punished. Mm-hmm. And punishment for a child is separation. It is having to endure an overwhelming emotion on their own, having to witness overwhelming emotion in the faces and bodies of their big people that they don't know what to do with. And often, again, the result is their own system becomes dysregulated and they get nervous and sad. I remember sitting in church with my daughter and she slapped my face because babies are learning how to use hands and limbs and, testing those things out. And I grabbed her hand and I said, no. And she heard like the drop in my voice, my eyebrows go down, and I separated her from my body, and she burst into tears. Mm-hmm.
So as well she should.
As well she should
right?
have.
Because that was a jolt to her nervous system. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's where it gets set up. I do these things and I get punished. I do these things and I get rewarded. So I want more reward. So I'm going to pay attention to what the big people want and do more of that. And baby grows up, and then there's just more big people. There's teachers and coaches and the lunch lady and extended family relatives. And then the next almost universal experience that all children have, and it goes into this masking question that you asked, is adults require children to do things that are for the adult's comfort, that are not beneficial to the child. Let me give you a very benign, well, it's not benign, but it seems on the surface. When I was growing up, we were required to finish the food on our plate.
Yep.
We didn't have a lot of money, right? Resources were scarce. And so my parents were like, we worked really hard. There's not a lot of this. You need to eat it. And on the surface, you can see that where they were coming from. But what it meant was that me as a little girl, I had to ignore my body's signals. And I had to put on a mask of like, okay, of compliance to please my parents and not get in trouble. And so that happens all over the place where we unintentionally, and this is often done by the people who love the child, we separate the child from their own body's information about what they like and what they don't like, what works for them and what doesn't, when they're overwhelmed, when they're in pain, when they're in distress, and we require them to fix your face. If you're going to, I'll give you something to cry about, right? Mm-hmm. And we require that they shove all that information from their body down in order to please the adult.
Yeah. Now, if you are listening to this and you are the parent of a child and you have done this, so have we. Everybody has done this.
Everyone has.
We're all humans. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say is what a beautiful summary of what happens. Like I want to go back and listen to that later, so I probably will. Okay, so completely without meaning to, the big people are imposing things on children. Children are predisposed to want to please their adults for safety reasons and survival reasons. And so if adults are not kind of attuned to, and most adults have not taken child development courses, right? If we're not attuned to what's happening developmentally, what's happening from a nervous system perspective, or we're just not aware, like actually it's a terrible idea to make kids finish their food because it cuts them off from their hunger signals and it makes them overweight later sometimes.
Yes.
For example.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of where masking starts, is like I have to do certain things to please my grown-ups because they need it that way. Now, there are some kids, I call them complicated kids around here, who actually can't or won't, mostly can't do that.
Yeah, yes.
Or they do it for some amount of time and then they get burned out.
Right.
So let's kind of pivot and talk about, and I love that you have 5 kids because you have ample experience to deal with, and you're, a coach and a teacher. So just walk us through kind of this masking as relates to like a nervous system that runs up against some barriers.
I was a kindergarten teacher for several years, and really it was during kind of the heyday of Ritalin when I'm going to share for me what is a tender story. And it always makes me a little emotional, which you're going to start to hear in my voice, because how I wish I could have done something different. And so the other thing that happens is that we then impose these structures on kids that are not meant for kids, right? Like I was teaching all day kindergarten in the state of Texas from 8 to 3:30 p.m. every day. And kids had to sit, and I had a student named Paul, and Paul was the sparkliest of sparkly kids. And I would just be on him all day. Paul, you need to sit down. Paul, you haven't finished your work. Paul, stop talking to Paul, 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 Paul. And I can see his face now just kind of melt and fall every time I said his name, because it wasn't anything good that I was about to tell him. And he knew that. And so when he went on Ritalin, I was so relieved, because as a teacher with 28 other little 5-year-old bodies in my class, it benefited me, but he lost that spark.
Oof.
And it is, I think it's interesting that I still feel like some sadness around that today. And I think that parents everywhere, we're like, how do I make some of my life easier? Because when you have complicated neurospicy kids, I have one, there is some extra work that is involved in that. There's some extra training and understanding that nobody sits us down to get.
Yeah.
I think what I would want parents to know is that, number one, the most important thing that you can learn to do is to repair and say, I am sorry that happened. I did die. I look at what's happened now, and I really wish we had done something different, but I love you and I'm here on your team. How can we work together? Because there is a collaborative effort between child and parent to create skills around, healthy, dignified, connected living.
Stop there for a second.
Sure, yeah.
It's not a word that many people use when talking about children. Dignified,
Yeah.
dignity.
Yeah.
And so let's just pause here for a second, because I think we both might want to go on a little bit of a rant about why we should, in fact, accord children some dignity and a dignified way of interacting with them. Do you want to riff on that for a second?
Oh, it's everything we do is for safety, connection, and dignity. If I could just give those 3 words, and it's as adults, like when you see politicians acting the way they act, it is, actually, do you edit this? Let's just take that out, because who the fuck cares about those guys?
We're going to leave it in, but we're not going to talk anymore about any more politicians. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, but even adults, right? What we are jockeying for every day is safety, connection, and dignity.
Yes.
Belonging, mattering. And so, of course, kids need that. And I think so often we sacrifice children's dignity for the benefit of the system they're in, the classroom, or for the benefit of the family that they're in.
Yeah, that's right.
And we teach them the only way you get to be safe and connected and feel like you matter is if you act this certain way. And if you can't do it on your own, then we're going to give you this pill that does it for you. But it actually ends up creating a child whose whole external structure is focused on other people and their expectations. And they don't ever get the chance to develop an internal sense of mattering, an internal sense of comfort with who they are. And unless we help them with that, they don't have the mental development yet to even know that that's what is happening.
Yeah. Okay. 2 things I want to say here. We are not anti-meds. There are times when medication is 100 million % what a child needs. So lest you hear Sara and me talking about medication in this way, this is not the only way. This is something that sometimes happens, and it can be awful for a kid, or it can literally be a lifesaver. I had a family once. The kid was 3 years old. He was unsafe. He would have died if not for his ADHD meds.
Right.
Even at that young age. And that's an extreme example. Okay. So I just wanted to put that out there. So, and now I've completely lost my train of thought.
I will say one thing, and maybe your train will come back. I have a son who's on meds that preserve his dignity. It allows him to function inside of the structure that he's going to be a part of for a short period of time in a way that allows him to get better grades, focus on getting his stuff done, and feel a more dignified existence. So absolutely. I'm so glad you said that.
Okay, back to yes, thank you for that because it did jog my memory. So we are asking kids to participate in a system. This is kind of going back to your earlier point about we're asking them to participate in activities that don't directly benefit them. Kids often, we think they have to go to school, and they do have to have some education. They don't know
Right.
things yet. But often I think we're in this like, you go to school, you go to college, you get married, or you have a relationship of some kind, you buy a house. Like there's this very single track automatic path that I think when many parents, not all, but certainly many, are going down this kind of, I'm going to have a baby route, you kind of you're having these visions of like, and it will be the perfect life. And then you get a complicated kid at your house, and that vision starts to wobble. Maybe it looks like the cliffs are just kind of falling down and you can't see past next week. And so what happens is we sometimes cling to the structures that we have. In other words, like you have to go to school. You have to wear these clothes. You have to wear these shoes. You have to do this activity. And it limits us, number one, from seeing the actual child in front of us. And number two, from accessing our wisdom and our creativity to kind of break through and see what might be on the other side of those automatic expectations. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. That is all about, well, I shouldn't say all. One of the major factors that as parents and as, this kind of is where my work comes in because I work with women who spend a lot of their day worrying what other people think about them. And when my child is going to school, true story, in flannel pajama bottoms, because those are the things that just feel best on his skin, I have to grapple with what are people going to think of me that I'm allowing, like quote unquote, allowing, because right, like try to stop a neurospicy kid from wearing what they want to wear sometimes. Mm-hmm. That's true in my case. Mm-hmm. What are they going to think of me? And so the gift of having these children is that they get to the heart of what causes so much of our suffering as people who are programmed and really conditioned to be these good girls or good parents because they hit at the heart. What will other people think of me? And it forces us to deal with that. And I will say that for a lot of us, we are much more willing to change negative behavior patterns in ourselves when it benefits our child. Mm-hmm. Than we are when it's just our own self-worth on the line. So I have seen a lot of women willing to take a look at, man, I really depend on outside validation when it affects their child than sometimes when it affects themselves. So it can be I think it's positive all the way around that it's this mirror.
Yeah. And that, if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, I sure wish it could feel positive, it can. We promise you it can. And, so much of when we have a complicated kid is focused on the child, right? What interventions do they need? What accommodations do they need? How does their environment need to be changed? And we forget that lots of times part of the environmental change that would benefit our children is to change what's happening up in our heads.
Yes.
Right. So we get to be willing to examine some of those beliefs. And what I hear you saying is some women you found are more willing to do that when their child's well-being is at stake. When that becomes clear that like, oh, I get to change this on behalf of someone else who needs me to do it. That's
yes.
that's the hook.
It is. Because if you are someone, and let me just speak, I was someone who was absolutely, it was like I was trapped by the opinions and expectations of other people. Yeah. And so I was teaching my children to be trapped by the opinions and expectations of others because I couldn't teach them any different. I was saying things like, we have to do this or so-and-so will get mad. We have to behave this way or else this terrible thing will happen. And so that is just me passing down, this hostage situation that I had been taught where other people's opinions are definitely the boss of you and you have to meet other people's expectations to be considered good, worthy, and valuable. If I never see that, that's what I give my kids. And that is where I'm saying I think it's just a gift either way. I'm not saying it's easy and I'm not saying it's not painful. And I'm not saying that there isn't some significant support that you need. That's why coaching exists, right? That's why there are, opportunities to get support in this process. But it is essential first for a woman to believe that other people, she can disappoint other people when she needs to, and it's going to be okay. For a kid to learn, you know what? I can disappoint other people and I am still good.
And that is where the rubber meets the road, because many complicated kids, back to this whole masking thing, compliance thing, cannot. Some of them are really good at masking, and we want to be aware of that. We want to be wary of that because compliance feels really good in the moment and has very dangerous consequences. Whatever, I'm going to oversell it a little bit. Has very dangerous consequences.
Yeah.
But that moment when they cannot comply, that's the moment when all of our stuff comes up and says to us, well, nobody did that for you. Well,
right.
What's going to happen if I let my kid talk to me that way, do this thing, go to school in flannel pajamas? What will the cost be? And that's real. Like, I think, you and I can sit here and talk about like, we got to get to the other side of that and it's painful and it's worth doing and blah, blah, blah. But it's also like, no, that stuff is terrifying.
Yes.
Because it used to be, back to this early childhood example, it used to be that would mean you were separated from the group, right? Or from your primary caregiver, which even more terrifying. And so to acknowledge that that's the pattern that's running.
Right.
And then decide to make a change or not.
Right.
Right. That's where that is so powerful. But it comes from this little being, sometimes not so little, who's like, I won't because I can't.
Right.
And I refuse to suffer the indignity
right.
of being forced to comply.
Right.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And I think the sturdiness that is so beneficial there starts with the mom, the dad, the caregiver, understanding I am valuable and worthy no matter what I do or don't do, right? There has to be some kind of self-connection to that idea for you to recognize the opportunity to grow it, allow it, foster it in these kids that we love. And I also just really quickly want to speak to just the gender dynamics at play in some of these, this masking that we're talking about. I was diagnosed with ADD about 2 years ago. And as I look back over the course of my life, I think it has a lot to do, with my age. I am 51 years old, squarely in, menopause and estrogen saying, bye, we had a good time. And that, contributed to the cognitive absence of estrogen and all of its effects. And so if you are a mom who is in, that 45 to 55 age group and you're feeling some of that, yes. But if I look back younger me, girls are underdiagnosed. We know this because it wasn't even required to have female bodies participating in medical studies until, do you want to guess? 1993.
Oh my God.
That was the year finally the law was like, okay, guys, we've waited for you to just do this on your own and you're not. So we're going to make you.
Mhm.
And what that meant is that everything we knew about attention and the deficit and the hyperactivity component was all done on male bodies. And so girls, then humans who are socialized as females, were told, try harder, just try harder. And because we present differently with more distractibility than hyperactivity, work harder, try again, do more, stay longer. And I see that masking technique just all through like my high school and college years where I just had to work harder, do more. And for women who continue to tie their academic performance, and this is not just women, but tying our value to the grade that we get. Are you happy with me? Did I please you?
Yeah.
Just creates this really unique circumstance where the masking actually has an effect on our physical health.
Yep.
Right? We
Yep.
now know that women have autoimmune disorders at 80, 80% more. 80%. Okay, let me say that correctly. 80% of autoimmune diagnoses are women.
I want to pile in there, right? When we are told to try harder and there's an actual gap between capability and it's not even capability really, but the conditions under which we're able to achieve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's no support. That like you can just think of a knob turning up the heat on the nervous system. Like that will put you into nervous system burnout
Yeah.
over X amount of time. And then if you've got any risk factors, if you've got any ACEs, if you have been abused, if you are in a bad relationship, if you are overtired, if you are a vegan and don't have like very, very good nutrition, you're not paying so much attention to that, right? Like there are all of these other factors that are also playing on your nervous system. You could, well, first of all, you probably will end up with an autoimmune disorder. At a minimum, you'll end up with anxiety
Mm-hmm.
that kind of just hums in the background.
Yeah.
And then you wonder why all your mom friends seem to be able to make the cupcakes and go to the PTA meetings and like do all the things. And all you want to do is take to your bed at the end of the night. Like
Yeah.
that's real.
Yeah.
That's a neurophysiology reality.
Yeah, it is. And it's an energy drain,
Yeah.
right? Just that constant hum of anxiety plus resentment, right? Because we can't underestimate the physiological impact of resentment and the way that you just never feel like you're getting it done. Everybody else is getting more help than you're getting. It's easier for everybody else. You don't have the same ability to articulate your needs and wants. There's so much, resentment that piles up there too. And then just to kind of go back and round out that gender dynamic, we still have different expectations of boys. And so this is not at all to go easy on boys. I have one girl, I have 4 boys. And so I had a lot of boys.
Yay.
And it's what I know, though, is that they have kind of some off ramps of the masking, highway that we want all the women to stay on, in that we still have the boys will be boys. Well, that's just Paul, that's just, and I am saying, yes, like, what about girls will be girls? Can we bring into this discussion as well? I'm not trying to fault that. I'm saying we need some of that for our female children as well. And a lot of the risk taking and the, hyperactive, behavior we see in boys, we look at as like the seeds of like good leadership and good future performance. And so how can we borrow from that and make some of that available to our female children as well?
Oh my God, I love that. Yeah. How about children will be children?
Yes.
Right?
Right.
Like, hello.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We have like days worth to discuss, but I am going to pin it there.
Yes.
If people want to learn more about you, Sarah, how do they do that?
I am on Instagram, Sara Fisk Coach. I also have a free Facebook group called Stop People Pleasing for women who want some help, who, have seen that this is an issue. They don't know exactly how to get out of it. That's exactly where I come in with really doable, actionable steps. I obviously have a particular lens that I look through, feminism and the dignity, the safety, and connection of all humans.
I love it. And are you still doing your podcast?
I am. Oh yeah, let's talk about that too. It's called the Ex Good Girl podcast, and it is wherever you get podcasts.
I love the Ex Good Girl podcast. I listen to it, from time to time. It's a good
Thank
listen.
you.
So if you
Thank you.
liked this, go listen to that. Sarah Bybee Fisk, you are wonderful. Thank you for being here.
I have loved it. Thank you.